Who in this world is capable of seeing their own funeral? A rhetorical question. No one expected an answer. The young girl was motionless. Her long blonde hair framed her peaceful face. Her eyes were closed. Nothing disturbed the peace of her body. A lonely female figure in a dark robe stood motionless by the coffin. The trees rustled around her. The girl thought that she really was dead. Dead. The brunette thought it was just some kind of divine joke. The girl folded her hands in black gloves in front of her in a prayerful gesture. The majestic mansion rose against the blue sky. The high windows shone brightly in the sun. A sudden loud cough broke the silence. The dissatisfied maid put her hands on her hips. The girl made a complaint to Her Highness. She asked the blonde sitting in bed to drink water more carefully. The maid exhaled sharply. She was irritated. Her Highness couldn't even cope with water. She wondered how she would eat. The only Archduchess of the Ranta Empire, Adrienne Swan Trobica, nervously clasped her hands in front of her. Stuttering, the blonde timidly said that she could eat. The maid rudely replied that she didn't care. The girl, without respect, abruptly snatched the glass of water from the trembling hands of the Archduchess. The maid was sure that Adrienne wouldn't be able to eat anything anyway, so why not just skip the meal? Her Highness timidly suggested that if it were just broth. She did not finish. The maid rudely interrupted her. She reminded her that Adrienne had already spilled everything last time, so much so that she had to throw out both her clothes and all the bed linen. So the maid angrily replied that it was impossible, because it was difficult for her to wash. The sickly-looking girl with disheveled hair said nothing. A single tear rolled down her pale face from her huge green eyes. It was Archduchess Trobica, a girl who was known to everyone in the empire for her poor health. As soon as Adrienne made her debut in high society, the Archduke noticed her and immediately married her. The body of the Archduchess, already very weak, became worse every day. The young girl couldn't even enjoy her honeymoon. She became more and more lonely. The Archduke was completely immersed in the work the Emperor gave him. Adrienne suffered. Gifts from the Archduke arrived regularly, but he himself was not around. The girl decided to ask the servants about her husband. The servant replied that although the Archduke had returned to the capital, His Majesty had ordered him to go to the palace immediately. Adrienne asked with sadness in her voice if her husband would not be able to come to the estate. The servant bowed respectfully. He replied to the lady that after the audience with the Emperor, a meeting was also scheduled. The butler politely asked the Archduchess whether he should convey a request to his master to remain in the capital for a day. Adrienne coughed violently. The girl nervously put a snow-white handkerchief to her lips. In a strangled voice, she asked Zimsker to do it. The Archduchess missed her husband very much. She was not afraid to admit it. Late at night, sleeping Adriana felt her husband's most tender touch on her hair. The girl instantly woke up and opened her green eyes. But she tried not to move. Our heroine enjoyed her husband's closeness. The black-haired man noticed that his wife had woken up. He immediately removed his hand. Archduke Noebian Trobica was upset. After all, he did not want to wake his wife. Adrienne sat up in bed. She asked her husband when he came. She reproached him for not fulfilling her wish. After all, she asked him to wake her up when No came. The brunette gently touched his wife's pale face. The man quietly said that he had just arrived. Noebian pressed the girl to his chest. The Archduchess closed her eyes. The girl enjoyed her husband's embrace and heartbeat. She quietly admitted that she missed him. The man pulled Adrienne closer to him, gently stroking her hair and confessing that he missed her too. The brunette's piercing blue eyes stared into space. Noebian repeated his confession. He missed his wife very much. The Archduke said thoughtfully that the courtiers were very worried about her. Having placed his wife in his arms, he anxiously asked if she had taken all the medications. Adrienne hesitantly confirmed that of course she had. The brunette hugged his wife tenderly. He reminded her that he told her this every time. He asked her not to worry about anything. The girl enjoyed her husband's closeness. She timidly asked how much longer she would have to lie like this. Noebian reminded that anyway, everyone in the empire already knew that his wife had a weak body. He told that people were more generous than Adrienne thought. The Archduchess wondered if this was true. She knew for a fact that even in this house people considered her useless. So the girl didn't believe that it was possible. That people outside this house were polite and understanding. Each of the spouses was thinking about their own. The young people were silent. Pain froze in their eyes. The Archduke reminded that if anyone tried to offend his wife, he would immediately cut the offender's throat. Adrienne closed her eyes. The girl thought that if only she could do something for her husband. It was a night in which the Archduchess did not want to fall asleep. The bedroom was filled with soft, gentle sounds. Adrian loved the lullaby her husband was softly humming, and his gentle pats were warm. The couple lay in a huge bed, and for some reason the girl felt like this was the last time she would experience it. Loud screams broke the silence of the night. The mansion lit up with all the windows. Someone demanded to call a doctor quickly. They turned to Her Highness with anxiety. Adrian sat on the cold marble floor. Her hands were stained with blood. There were also bloody marks on the light floor. Several maids were bustling around the Archduchess. The girls were demanding that the maid bring the medicine quickly. Adrian brought the once snow-white handkerchief to her face. Now it was all stained with blood. The girl thought that she shouldn't have thought that way. The maids insisted that their mistress needed to take some medicine. They promised that it would stop the bleeding. That time indeed was the last. One of the maids tried to get her mistress drunk. The other two supported the Archduchess. Drops of cold sweat mixed with bitter tears on the girl's face. Blood suddenly started to flow from her throat. It became difficult for Adrian to breathe. The Archduchess begged for help. It seemed as if the girl was drowning in the dark depths of the sea. The last thoughts of the unfortunate woman were about No. She asked her husband for forgiveness. The girl slowly came to her senses. She tried to open her eyes with difficulty. She thought with horror that she had really dreamed all of this. Lying in bed, Adrian was making some muffled mutterings and indistinct sounds. A voice was heard nearby. The unknown woman said with displeasure that no matter what the girl said now, she would still have to go. Adrian focused on her sensations and thought about how light her head felt today. And the body, too. The female voice continued to ask with displeasure whether the lady was listening to her. The girl sat up abruptly in bed. She looked at the woman in surprise. She thought it was Annie. The maid stared at her mistress in surprise. The Archduchess asked Annie when she had grown so old. And then she asked if it was possible that this person was her new servant. In a sharp voice, the maid asked the girl with displeasure, "Who the hell was this Annie?" The woman immediately said that it was unimportant. She asked if her mistress was going to go. The girl timidly asked where. The maid answered, "To the funeral." The stern person said that the Archduchess had died. As far as Adrian knew, they had only one Archduchess in the empire. Touching her black locks sharply, the green-eyed beauty remembered her weak-past body. She thought with horror, "Is she really dead?" Newspapers and magazines vied with each other to write news about the deceased Archduchess. Some publications wrote about the achievements and scandals in the life of the deceased lady. The brunette stared blankly into space in bewilderment. The girl couldn't understand how this could happen. The white brick mansion stood out against a bright blue sky. The maid said that Duke Trobeck had asked if she wanted to go to the funeral. The brunette asked again if her husband had really asked her about this. The maid snorted contemptuously. The woman reminded him that he was not yet the mistress's husband. The maid said that the Archduchess had died. She remarked that it would be interesting if her mistress, who had been his mistress, had been in her place. The brunette's green eyes widened at the shocking information. She didn't understand what was happening. Suddenly something clicked in her head, and she saw, as if from the outside, the last moments of her past life. The girl thought about it. She wondered if these were really memories, and not just a nightmare. The brunette staggered and grabbed her head with her right hand. The girl managed to lean on the back of the chair with her left hand to keep from falling. She groaned loudly. The maid put her hands on her hips. The woman reminded him that the funeral would take place later in the evening. She noted that her mistress needed to eat. She looked closely at the girl and said that she also needed to sleep. The brunette stared at her reflection in the mirror. The young lady was perplexed. Did she die in some nightmare and reincarnate as the mistress her husband was dating? The table was laden with a variety of dishes, set for dinner. The aromas hung in the air and tickled the nose. The brunette thought that it must have been delicious. The girl tried to remember how long ago she had had an appetite. The maid watched the mistress attentively. She asked if the girl had no appetite. The brunette perked up. She said she was ready to eat. Suddenly, she looked at the maid and asked her name. The maid stared at her mistress in surprise. The woman asked without ceremony whether the lady had gone mad. The lady considered this insulting. Sitting down at the table, the maid told that the mistress had been acting strangely for the last few days. She laughed and cried for no reason. From further conversation, the brunette learned that it was the body of Count Acacia's wife, Acacia Vli. She remembered that she knew Acacia. Old Count Acacia was a vassal of the Duke, but this man did not hold a high position. Our heroine knew that the Count had married a young girl. but she could not come to the wedding due to illness. The young lady thought sadly that she and the Countess were similar, and she felt very sorry about it. Looking at her mistress, the maid said that, in general, if the lady decided to go crazy, then let her go. The brunette stared at the maid in surprise. The woman noticed that her mistress was hungry. She decided to bring more food. The brunette thought about it. The girl understood that if she said that she was a duchess, she could get into trouble. Looking at the empty plate in front of her, the girl tried to remember how long it had been since she had eaten herself. Smiling contentedly and closing her eyes in pleasure, the brunette leaned back in her chair. She noted with joy that her current body was healthy. Suddenly, a male voice broke the silence. A young man entered and greeted the lady. The girl noted that it was a servant from the Duke's mansion. The servant wanted to clarify what to say to the Archduke. He was interested in whether the lady would be at the Duchess's funeral. Green eyes flashed. Our heroine understood that this Vli was her husband's mistress. The girl replied that she would think about it. The curious maids watched their mistress through the half-open door. They were surprised that the lady was reading a newspaper. One of the maids expressed the hope that it was a catalogue. It would suit their lady better. The girls whispered among themselves. One of the maids remarked that it was the first time she had seen the lady so calm. The second maid supported her. Suddenly, the head maid approached them. She tore them away from watching their mistress. She ordered them to go to work. The girls apologized and ran away. Marge closed the apartment door and heard her mistress call out to her. The woman jumped at the voice. She thought that the lady would ask her strange questions again. The maid remembered today's questions. The lady wanted to know if Marge was her nanny, where Count Acacia was now. She asked what her own name was. Marge asked what the lady wanted to talk about. She noted that anytime soon everyone would think her mistress was crazy. The brunette raised her green eyes to the maid. Looking straight at Marge, the girl asked if she was really Noebian Trobek's lover. The maid was surprised. The woman leaned towards her mistress and asked if she was really going to tell the truth now. The brunette did not understand what truth she should tell. Marge whispered in the lady's ear that she expected to hear the truth about the lady having had relations with the Archduke. Our heroine asked if that was really true. The maid admitted that the lady had always been interested in the Archduke. Marge concluded that in this case there was only one explanation. The lady was his mistress. The brunette froze in bewilderment. She couldn't believe it. Marge reminded her that the lady had received jewelry and dresses as gifts from the Archduke. The woman folded her arms across her chest and demanded that the lady no longer hide anything and tell the truth. Marge asked the lady if the Count would let her go now. After all, there had been no relations between them for a long time. The brunette thought for a moment. She sighed sadly and quietly whispered that the maid didn't know that either. The girl was upset that no one here could give her an exact answer. She stood up abruptly from her seat. The brunette decided to accept the invitation to the funeral first. There she would be able to see Noebian. Dressed in mourning attire, our heroine slowly descended the marble staircase. The girl noticed that everyone was so easy with her. She wondered what Vli Akacia was like. Marge called out to the lady, informing her that the carriage was waiting. The girl headed towards the carriage. Sitting in the carriage, the brunette thought that they were similar in appearance. The girl peered into her reflection in the glass. The current one had a healthy body. Our heroine suddenly thought that her husband had a mistress. She found it funny. The girl was wondering if this Vli really had a relationship with her husband. She didn't want to believe it. She hoped that her husband couldn't meet anyone because he was busy with work. Swaying in the carriage, the brunette tried to understand that if this was not so, then what kind of relationship could there be between them? The cemetery, among the many graves and tombstones, was quite crowded. Everyone was dressed in mourning clothes. While in the crowd of people who came to the funeral, our heroine thanked God for her resurrection. Holding a small mourning hat on her hair, the girl suddenly wondered, was she an outstanding person? She remembered that she got married right after her debut. She hardly left the house because of her illness. She didn't know anyone. Watching those around her, she noticed that everyone was crying as if they knew her well. She felt awkward and couldn't believe it. Our heroine looked at her former self. She noticed that she was dressed in beautiful clothes and only her face was revealed. In front of her lay the motionless body of a pale, exhausted woman with closed eyes. I thought that it was similar to the funeral of Empress Retina, who died young. Our heroine froze, looking at the familiar young lady who lay motionless in the coffin. And she thought that she was dead. She really was dead. I wondered, what now? It turned out that Adrian's life was over. Our heroine perked up when she heard whispers that the Duke had arrived. Everyone sympathized with him. They said that it was very hard for him. Suddenly the brunette looked back and saw her husband right in front of her. The tall, slender man was overcome with grief. He was dressed in a mourning tuxedo. Noebian's eyes were red from crying, and his whole figure expressed grief and regret at the loss. Our heroine looked down in surprise and embarrassment. She realized that Noebian was in front of her. The young man was grieving. Bitter tears flowed from his eyes. This did not bother the Archduke. The brunette clearly understood that she was here and now. She was alive, and she was breathing. The young men stood opposite each other. The girl hesitantly addressed the Archduke by name. Our heroine coughed embarrassedly, trying to attract her husband's attention. But the man rushed past the brunette to the coffin, saying the name of his dead wife. He called Adrian. The Archduke was grieving. The brunette did not hide his grief. He cried, looking at his dead wife who lay motionless in the coffin. A large crowd of people gathered around, all looking at the grief-stricken young man. People were crying. Women were putting handkerchiefs to their eyes. Men were mourning discreetly. Our heroine stood in the middle of this crowd, her eyes downcast. The young boy and girl were very sad. They also mourned Rihanna. They cried. The young man said that his sister should have lived. He repeated that Rihanna should have lived. A young girl stood next to him and tried to calm him down. Our heroine could no longer look at these loud sobs and general grief. The brunette turned away from the coffin. Sobs choked our heroine. The girl thought that someone had died instead of her. Tears rolled from the eyes of the young lady. The girl dreamed that if only her relatives could call her Adrian. But the brunette understood perfectly well that no one would call her that now, because the Adrian that everyone knew was dead. Night fell. Soon the cemetery was empty. The lonely figure of a girl in black stood in the darkness, leaning against a tree. Nervously clenching her fingers, our heroine convinced herself that it was stupid to just wait. But the brunette was sure that the man she was expecting would definitely come here again. Standing at the grave where Adrian Swan Trobic, the mistress of Northern Trobic and a native of Eastern Paretta, was laid to rest, our heroine asked Noe to come. Suddenly she heard some sounds. Peering into the darkness, our heroine saw the outline of a rider. The brunette perked up. Had she really waited? The man jumped off his horse. The servant saluted him. The girl tried to see who had arrived, but it was dark outside. Nothing could be seen. Suddenly the moonlight fell on the figure of a galloping man. Our heroine realized that it was not Noebian. Hiding behind one of the trees, the brunette peered closely at the stranger. She was interested in who this person was. The full moon came out from behind the clouds again, illuminating everything around. Our heroine clearly saw a handsome blonde man with red eyes. The stranger approached the fresh burial. It was obvious to the naked eye that the young man was suffering. Suddenly the young man fell to his knees. With a trembling hand he touched the tombstone with the words engraved on it. Our heroine carefully came out from behind the tree. The girl was perplexed. She could not understand who this young man was. Peering into the darkness, the girl realized that the man had come in the middle of the night. Suddenly, she was even more surprised because she realized that the guy was crying. The girl looked at the grief-stricken young man who was openly crying at her grave. The stranger's shoulders shook with sobs. Our heroine clenched her fingers into a fist. She wondered if he really knew Adrian. She was perplexed and tried to understand what he wanted by appearing like this. Suddenly, the girl realized that she didn't want anyone to see her. At least not today. The brunette carefully headed towards the exit of the cemetery. Our heroine froze in surprise. The wind ruffled her hair. The stranger called her name again questioningly. The brunette looked more closely at the young man. With surprise, she noticed blood on his snow-white waistcoat. The young man rose from his knees. Suddenly he froze, coughing. The brunette realized that she needed to run immediately. The girl understood that she could not date anyone until she understood whose body she was in. Suddenly the stranger extended his hand towards her, begging Adrian to wait. The girl rushed from the spot. She heard the heartbreaking cry of the young man who was calling her by name. In the mansion, the maid was shocked by the appearance of Milady. She paid special attention to the mistress's legs. The girl laughed nervously. She explained her appearance by saying that she had simply been running. The head maid immediately ordered Iona to prepare the medicine. The young girl with blue hair immediately rushed to carry out the order. The brunette sank down onto the soft sofa in the pink living room. The girl realized that she was very tired. Iona knelt before her. The young maid carefully anointed her mistress's wounded legs. Our heroine felt a headache. She suspected that it happened from the death and transition into the body of her husband's mistress, and to the man on her grave. The girl kept thinking about the grieving young man at her grave, whom she had seen for the first time that night. The brunette wondered if this guy hadn't appeared at her grave. Would she have been able to meet Noebian? Marge brought a cup of tea. The woman asked if her mistress had met the Archduke. The brunette did not answer, her head bowed low. She was lost in thought. Having come to her senses, the girl answered that she had seen him. She admitted that they had not looked at each other or spoken. Our heroine realized that she could do nothing, as if she were in another world. She just cried and hid. The brunette understood that the hardest part was for Noebian, who lost her and had to greet the guests. But the girl doubted him. Clenching her hands into fists, the brunette thought about what to do now. She thought of the Archduchess's body. Now she realized that she had been more beautiful there, in the coffin, than she had been in her sickbed. Remembering how she stood by the coffin with her body, the girl understood that now she didn't even have a body to which she could return. She remembered that after the wedding, her husband was always so busy that he was not with her for more than 2 days. To fulfill his duty, he had to stay near her body for 100 days. Now it all seemed funny to her. She was pulled out of her sad thoughts by the maid's voice. Marge admitted that she thought the lady would like it. She wondered why her mistress was crying. The brunette cried about the fact that at the moment she was healthy in body, but lost everything. Covering her face with her hands, the brunette thought about how great it would be if all this turned out to be just a dream. Night. The snow-white mansion shone mysteriously in the rays of the full moon. In the silence of the night, attentive eyes examined the building. The dark male figure of a warrior in a red cloak froze, peering intently at the outlines of the majestic building. The loud call of the young maid pulled the brunette out of her thoughts. The girl opened the door to the lady's apartment and reported that there was such a thing in front of the house. The maid timidly approached her mistress and handed her the letter. The brunette's green eyes widened when she recognized Noebian's handwriting. The message said that she had to fulfill the promise. The brunette had seen her husband's handwriting many times. The young maid looked out from behind the door. She said that someone who had been at the funeral of the Archduke's wife had been called from outside. Blinka asked the maid what she had answered. She admitted that she had not named her mistress. The girl explained that they simply asked who was present. That's why the maid said she would find out. Our heroine decided to go out to the late visitors, but she was suddenly stopped by Marge. The woman asked if the lady knew who it was. She suggested the reception room on the first floor, but the brunette abruptly refused. The girl decided that she needed to check something herself and resolutely headed towards the door. Hurrying through the corridors of the huge mansion, our heroine was sure that this visitor was Noah. Barely touching the cold railings with her fingertips, the girl quickly descended the stairs. The brunette was sure that it was definitely him. Hurrying to get downstairs, the girl anticipated the meeting. Her cheeks were flushed. She convinced herself that Noah was behind that door. As she opened the heavy double doors, our heroine was already dreaming of an unforgettable meeting. But her expectations were not met. Before her eyes appeared a completely unfamiliar young man with a shock of red hair on his head. The young lady's face clearly showed undisguised disappointment. This was not Noah. 2 young warriors in red cloaks stood by the carriage. The young man reported that the servant's name was Marge, and she was in the graveyard of Trobeck. The young man with blonde hair bowed his head, listening to his warrior's report. One of the young men said that he learned from the woman that she did not remember seeing his master. The wounded young man struggled to get out of the carriage. His loyal warriors tried to help him. The red-haired boy asked if their master had fallen in love. The warriors wondered what he was going to do. The red eyes flashed angrily. The blonde turned sharply to his servant and asked if he had gone mad. The warrior was sure that the girl would be surprised if the bandaged guy suddenly started asking if she was that ghost from the cemetery. The interlocutor objected. He explained that His Highness was not looking for a ghost. He was looking for a beautiful and timid girl. The prince narrowed his red eyes angrily. He hissed angrily, how dare his servant call Adrian a ghost? The red-haired man immediately bowed. The young man pressed his hand to his chest and asked for forgiveness, admitted that he had made a mistake. The warrior tried to understand who his master was looking for so diligently. His Highness replied that it was no longer important. Neil objected. The servant tried to convince his master that anyone would be scared when they saw his appearance. The young man explained that the girl was scared even when she saw him, and when she sees his red eyes, she will definitely be scared. His Highness looked at the snow-white building with regret, agreed with his warrior, said that he was right, suggested to return. As the prince got into the carriage, he looked back at his warriors. The young man ordered them to find out everything about her. The blonde man gasped and awkwardly tried to climb into the carriage on his own. His shoulders shook. From the acute pain and loss of blood, His Highness lost consciousness and collapsed, as if mown down under the wheels of the carriage. The warrior turned to his friend. He promised to return His Highness to the palace. He advised Neil to carry out the prince's order. Having somehow placed the prince in the carriage, he shouted to the coachman on the box to take them to the palace faster. The carriage jerked away, leaving Neil's lonely figure in the darkness of the night, only the boy's cloak fluttering in the wind. The red-haired warrior remembered the tears on His Highness's pale face. He exclaimed in bewilderment, "Could this damn prince really have been crying?" Luxurious blonde hair and at the same time a sinister hostility. This was the second Prince of Rhodes, the womanizer of the empire. The one who will say "go on" with a straight face, even if girls start undressing in front of him. He was called the most problematic in the state. This young man was always handsome and crazy, considering that literally this morning he made a noise. The warrior ran through the corridors of the castle after his master and asked if he was really okay. His Highness insisted that he was okay. The young man did not believe that Roydness could be okay. After all, the prince had been attacked by a beast. The servant insisted that his master needed to have his serious wounds healed. But His Highness did not agree. He insisted that he did not need it. Neil was worried that things could get worse. The prince insisted that nothing would happen. The servant noted that His Highness was in his element. The guy hoped that he had no more things to do today, and they could be done tomorrow. Suddenly a loud scream was heard from behind the closed door. The warrior thought that something had happened. The servant opened the door slightly and said with apprehension that he heard some screams. He did not finish his sentence. The warrior observed a strange picture. A long-haired girl was sitting in a thin dress on her knees. In front of her, with a bloody sword in his hands, stood a prince. The warrior said he did not know that the prince had a meeting. His Highness replied that he did not know that either. Neil looked closely and realized that this girl was the daughter of a nobleman. The young man noted to himself that the prince was invariably popular. His Highness slowly pulled the sharp end of the sword away from the half-naked, trembling girl. He abruptly ordered her to leave. The uninvited guest admitted that she simply wanted to convey. She did not finish. She was rudely interrupted by the prince, who asked if the visitor's ears were blocked. Sometime later, the servant was bandaging his master. The young man asked the prince why he had driven the girl away in such a way. The warrior was worried that the rumors about his master could get even worse. The prince replied that he did not care. His Highness held a newspaper in his hands. His eyes widened in surprise. The prince asked in bewilderment what he was reading. The warrior helpfully suggested that this was all the news of the state for today. The newspaper published shocking news. The press wrote that Trobek's wife had died at dawn from an illness. The prince froze at this news. He did not take his eyes off the newspaper. Suddenly, the blonde jumped up. The servant tried to restrain His Highness. He explained that his wounds could come apart if he moved. But the prince, not listening to the arguments of his warrior, jumped on his horse. Holding his bandaged hand, His Highness galloped off into the distance. The warrior never thought he would ever see the prince cry over someone's death. The young man wondered how close he had been to the deceased. The young man firmly decided that he should find out more about this green-eyed Marge. It was noisy in Count Acacia's mansion. The lady was asked many different questions. For example, where to put what. The brunette looked around carefully. The girl noted that some furniture in the living room would no longer be needed. She decided that it could be removed. Looking at the work of her hands, our heroine realized that after removing many unnecessary things, the surroundings became tidier. The brunette decided that they definitely needed someone to run the house. Suddenly, the butler called out to her. The man asked if he could ask the girl for help. The butler explained that the count usually did this, but he wasn't there. Brunette chuckled, agreed that she could be useful here. She helped the man with pleasure. The senior maid watched all their actions carefully. Marge snapped at the young maids, telling them they needed to hurry up too. Our heroine was pleased with the work done. Now she could relax a little. The maids were taking out the furniture. The girl thought that she had no idea what would happen to her next, but she could have made friends with the residents of this house. Slowly descending the stairs, the girl thought about what kind of promise Flea had made with her husband. The brunette held a note in her hands. She understood that this piece of paper meant nothing, but for some reason it worried her. She wondered what kind of relationship they had. She imagined that maybe it was an informal friendship. But her husband was always alone. Green eyes stared thoughtfully into the void. The girl thought that maybe she was a relative then. If she was a relative of Noebian, then it turned out that she was also from the imperial family. The brunette understood that Vli, being their relative, would not have married the old and powerless Count Acacia. It turned out that they were friends. Adrienne was sitting at the table with a book in her hands. The head maid asked her mistress if she had read the book. The brunette answered that yes. She was holding a weighty volume in her hands. She explained that the book looked interesting. Looking at Marge, the girl explained that there were so many inviting books on the bookshelf. The head maid and the two maids looked frightened and surprised. The young maids tried to hide behind Marge. Adrienne lowered her eyes. The brunette suspected that Vli was far from reading. The former archduchess giggled. She couldn't imagine Noebian, who graduated with honors from the academy, and a girl who had never read books. The brunette laughed. The young woman realized that this was the most illogical thing. By the small pool with a fountain and lotus flowers, Adrienne gazed at her reflection. On the surface of the water, she saw a beautiful girl. There was something special about the fact that they looked alike. The brunette didn't take her eyes off her reflection. She understood that until now Vli had been behaving stupidly. Clutching the delicate fabric of her dress, she knew she couldn't continue to be like this. She decided she had to change. Adrienne thought about it. She knew she had to find out what connected them as soon as possible. Looking at her reflection in the waters of the pool, the brunette decided that she would go to him. She couldn't wait forever. Her thoughts were interrupted by Marge's excited voice. The maid was running towards her mistress, lifting the hem of her dress high. The news she heard shocked our heroine. The maid told her that the master had returned, Count Acacia. Suddenly, the young woman thought that perhaps the count knew about that promise. The man in the formal suit was in his office. The count stood thoughtfully by the arched window. Our heroine in a soft pink dress appeared in the office door. The man looked back at the sound. The count's gaze lingered on his wife. The girl thought that her husband was happy and surprised by her arrival. The silence in the office was filled with something unsaid. The count poured tea into a porcelain cup. He asked the brunette tensely whether she had met the Archduke. Our heroine was surprised. She looked at her interlocutor carefully. She said that she had not met him. The man, stuttering slightly, asked if his wife really had no intention of fulfilling her promise. Judging by the husband's behavior, it seemed that the count really knew about this promise. The brunette was puzzled as to what was going on with the man looking at her like that. She innocently asked what promise he had in mind. Suddenly the man jumped up from his seat and fell on his knees. He begged to be saved. He begged me to keep my promise. He said he didn't want to die a miserable death at the end of the year. Adrienne was surprised and shocked by the man's behavior. She screamed, turning to the count. The man explained that the others lived very calmly at his age, and he still suffered, working for him. The brunette ordered the count to stand up. The man quietly muttered that the girl knew that Noebian was merciless. Adrienne was puzzled. She had simply asked what the promise was, and the count had reacted like that. The girl approached the count, who was sitting on the floor. The brunette tried to explain that she was simply interested in what they were talking about. The man was pale. He grabbed his throat with trembling hands. He explained that if he told him these words, then he would have his head cut off. The brunette thought about it. She understood that this was not a simple tea party agreement. She remembered the note reminding her to fulfill the promise. The count didn't want to be tied into this. He didn't want to come between them. He actually thought it was an illogical wedding to begin with. The man clarified. Didn't they do this so that his wife could officially become Noebian's lover? The girl angrily clenched her fists. She remembered her suffering husband at her funeral. She remembered how the man cried from grief. The brunette was angry. This Vli. She became her husband's mistress, Noebian Trobic. The Archduke stood on the scarlet carpet in the prince's apartments. The red-eyed blonde looked at Noe intently. The brunette said sarcastically that he had heard that the prince was holding a pointless event like the anniversary of the victory. His Highness congratulated him with undisguised mockery in his voice. The Archduke's voice echoed loudly throughout the hall. The blonde asked if No would be there. He reminded him that he was the one who won the battle. His Highness expressed the hope that Archduke Noebian would not upset him. The brunette frowned. He reminded the prince that he was in mourning now. He told His Highness that he had to see his wife off. Having bowed to the prince, Noebian was about to leave the hall. He said that it was time for him to go. The young man turned and slowly walked away from His Highness. A promise was heard from behind him. The prince assured his interlocutor that he would come. The Archduke stopped abruptly. His Highness grinned. The blonde mockingly asked if Noebian hadn't wanted this. A tense silence fell between the men. The air in the spacious room thickened. Neil reminded his master with surprise that he had already been there. His Highness, without turning, said that they had not yet made sure. Looking back at his servant, Rhodes said that in that case there was nothing to sympathize with. The red-haired warrior reflected that the Archduke must have heard of his Highness's visit. The prince himself thought it was unimportant. Neil approached his master. He reminded his Highness that the Archduke had not shown the body after the first day. It was said that the Emperor himself declared that he did not want the body to be a spectacle for onlookers. The red-haired warrior wondered if he was overdoing it. Did he really want to become the romantic of the century? He understood that even the Archduke could not avoid this for long. It was a procedure that even the late Empress Retina could not avoid. Neil said that if the prince wanted to formally express his condolences, he could do everything in accordance with established procedure. His Highness objected impatiently. He thought it was unnecessary. Rhodes suspected that the bastard would never give up the body. His Highness ruffled his blonde hair. He ordered the damned invitation to the victory celebration to be sent to Count Acacia. Neil thought, since the Count was the Archduke's vassal, he probably wouldn't be able to show up. It wouldn't be right for a vassal to be where his lord didn't show up. Suddenly, the red-haired warrior had an idea. He looked at his Highness with surprise and bewilderment. The prince slowly climbed the steps. He told what he had heard about the mistress of the house, that she was a young girl. Looking back at his warrior, he explained that this meant that she would have to have a maid with her at all times. Neil was surprised. He wondered if his Highness would really like to meet Marge in person. Why did the prince suddenly start talking about the maid of the Acacia house? A few days later, Count Acacia grabbed his throat with trembling hands and said that if he gave him this, he would cut off his head. The man said he didn't want to come between them. He said it was an illogical wedding to begin with. He asked if they had done this so that his wife could officially become the Archduke's mistress. Our heroine stayed in the mansion for a while to recover from the shock. Lying on a huge bed, she thought about the information about the mistress. In aristocratic society, it was normal to have unmarried men and women as lovers. It wasn't even funny. The brunette understood that at this rate she would only think about Noebiana. The girl got out of bed and decided that she needed to get some fresh air. Suddenly, her nervously trembling fingers touched the cold cover of a glossy magazine. The girl opened it and forgot about everything. The magazine absorbed Adrienne's attention for a long time. The publication was full of incredibly beautiful women's outfits. The magazine spoke of a banquet in honor of the victory of the second Prince of Rhodes, and it printed the latest trends in dresses and hats that might charm him. Our heroine thought about the fact that everyone was only talking about the second prince. Not many years have passed since the second prince returned to the capital. Adrienne was sure that he was more inclined to be on the battlefield and accumulating achievements than to throw parties like this. Suddenly, she was distracted by a knock at the door. The girl allowed her to enter. Iona reported to the lady that the dresses she had ordered had already arrived. The brunette was surprised by the dresses. The maid explained that they had been adjusted as the mistress had ordered. Adrienne was perplexed. There were already so many outfits. She didn't understand why she needed more. Why another pile of clothes that she hadn't even worn yet? The maid reminded that the lady had said that she definitely wanted to debut this season. These words surprised the brunette. She decided to check with the maid. Adrienne asked if she hadn't made her debut yet. The blue-haired maid was scared. She asked if she had said something wrong. The young woman thought. She knew that she was already 22 years old. The maid confirmed it. She said the lady was upset that she had not been able to make her debut until she was 22. She recalled the lady's words that if the debut did not meet her standards, the mistress threatened to burn down the estate. She admitted that the count was furious. Our heroine grabbed her head. She felt incredible shame. And it wasn't even she who did it. Adrienne was perplexed. She wondered what this woman was thinking when she said that. She wasn't even of noble birth. Carefully lowering her legs to the floor, the brunette asked the maid where her dresses were now. The huge room, filled with all sorts of finished products, as well as accessories in the form of handbags and jewelry, was striking in its size. Our heroine asked if she was looking at a top-class emerald. The man half-bowed and nodded that she was right. Adrienne folded her arms across her chest. The brunette slowly looked around the place she found herself in with Marge and Jonah. The young woman held a document in her hands. It was a check. She studied it intently. The salesman tried to suppress a mocking grin. He thought that the customer wouldn't be able to understand anything, even if she looked at the receipt. The man remembered saying this to the lady because she didn't understand or know anything, but he insisted that it was of the highest quality. The salesman chuckled because this customer was always like that, so he decided that he could leave everything as it was. Adrian peered at the calculations. The check had all the most expensive items. She thought that if you don't take the dress into account, it would be the most expensive. The brunette thought about the salesman, that he really did put a lot of effort into deceiving her. She tore her green eyes away from the receipt she was studying. The girl pointed her fan at the emerald necklace. The salesman perked up. He immediately started saying that it was for her. He didn't finish his sentence. The brunette interrupted his rant. The girl asked if this emerald was of the highest class. The salesman immediately bowed deeply to the lady. He explained that he knew little about the valuation of things. He said that he was simply an intermediary. Our heroine grinned. Unexpectedly, the brunette said that in that case she was ready to explain everything to him. Both maids looked at their mistress in surprise. Adrian made the salesman look at her. The man flushed. A drop of cold sweat slowly ran down the salesman's pale cheek. The girl pointed with a neat finger at her amazing eyes. She said that this was the color of the highest quality emerald. The green eyes on the girl's beautiful face sparkled. Having grown up without a mother, she learned to hold her head high. When Adrian was a little girl, she was taught that high-quality jewelry required a thorough inspection. She was told that everything could be known if only one looked into the center of the stone. Since Adrian was a princess who had to maintain her dignity, she had to work several times harder than everyone else. In this situation, the young woman understood that indeed no one could be trusted. The girl was surprised that the seller was trying to sell her this useless, shiny thing. Flia simply wanted the best and most expensive things. She demanded that the very best be brought to her. The seller made excuses. He said that no matter what, he was entirely to blame for bringing a bad product. The man was about to bring another dress. The girl stopped him, told him to forget about it. The man stared at the visitor, dumbfounded. It looked like she would be able to turn a blind eye to all this. He decided that he was lucky. The brunette said that she would return only the low-quality goods. She asked to deduct their price from the total amount. The girl also said that she should receive an apology directly from the store owner. The merchant shuddered at these words and froze in place. The man said that the owner did not know this. The seller admitted that it was entirely his fault. He begged me not to be angry. He promised to tell the jeweler who made this jewelry and the lady directly. And next time he promised to bring everything as it should be. The man looked at the visitor with suspicion and wondered if this woman had always been so smart. The customer admitted that she had no complaints about the dress. She just wanted her money back. She could continue to do business with the store, but there could be trust issues because of this incident, so it would be hard to ignore. The brunette folded her arms across her chest and said that a written apology would also be appropriate if the store owner was short on time. The head maid and Jonah were watching this whole situation. The young maid admired such a cool mistress. Marge was shocked. The blue-haired maid asked Marge if she had seen the look on the salesman's face. The head maid laughed heartily. The woman admitted that it was quite a sight. Jonah told the lady that if she didn't like the dress, she could just send it away. She explained to the lady that then she would have received an even better dress. The brunette chuckled. The girl explained that it didn't suit her. Nowadays, such dresses would attract too much attention on her. The brunette thought about it. She understood that there was nothing good in being the center of attention now. It was enough to just show her face. Adrian's face wasn't recognizable. But if she attracted too much attention, someone she knew would definitely notice the resemblance. The girl looked up and saw the surprised looks of Marge and the young maid. The brunette asked again why they were looking at her like that. The maids were perplexed. They thought that their mistress always loved to be the center of attention. Marge asked permission to take her leave. The woman explained that she still had work to do. The brunette looked at her maids carefully. Their thoughts were written on their faces. Adrian noticed the outfit. The dark green velvet of the dress and the transparent silk trim were astonishing. The girl asked if it was too revealing for a debutante. She was told that it was just the way she liked it. The brunette closed her eyes. The girl understood that thanks to such an outfit she would not only attract attention, but everyone would only look at her. Iona glanced sideways at her mistress in surprise. She recalled her own words. That wasn't she the one who said, "It would be a sin not to show such beauty." The brunette first objected that it wasn't her who said it. Then she suddenly pretended to remember that it was her words. Anyway, to meet Noebian she had to get to a big party. Unexpectedly, she said that a victory banquet might be a good place for the debut. Iona objected to the lady. She reminded her that the banquet in honor of the victory was supposed to take place tomorrow. Adrian thought about it. It was a tight deadline, of course, but the brunette already had her dress ready, so she decided she could try. The voice of the young maid brought her out of her thoughts. Iona reminded her that they had no invitation. The brunette was surprised at what they were talking about. Was it because her family was so small that they could not get an invitation? The girl forgot how different it was from the Archduke's family. The brunette said that she needed to ask the Count if there was any way. She asked the maid where he was now. Iona answered that the gentleman had been in the office all day. Adrian wondered if Count Acacia had enough influence to get an invitation to the banquet that was to take place tomorrow. The girl was running down the corridor when the maid called out to her. The brunette looked back. Marge and the butler stood in the hall. The head maid announced that they had received an invitation to the victory banquet. It was a great honor. Adrian leaned over the railing and expressed surprise that this happened in the middle of the night. The butler smiled happily and glowed with happiness. Marge decided that she needed to start preparing for tomorrow's banquet right away. The woman admitted that she had worked here for 30 years, but this was the first time she had received an invitation like this. All the inhabitants of the mansion were delighted. The invitation was passed from hand to hand. The young lady watched all this from the height of the balcony. The girl was excited by the news and was perplexed. Could it really be that Noabian had sent this invitation? Adrian hoped to hear everything from No personally. Was Vlee his lover or not? The girl understood that she was not ready to trust anyone. She thought that she would not allow other people's words to break them. Graceful female hands held tightly to the male elbow. The Count turned to Madame. He declared that it was too late to speak when they had already arrived, but the brunette in a stunning outfit and a discreet hairstyle looked closely at her husband. She asked what had happened. The pale Count looked very bad. He wondered if he really had to go. He was shaking and getting more expensive. The brunette said that it was certainly hard, but she couldn't go without a partner. Everyone was so excited that she was invited to the banquet. It was an honor for the family. After all, it was the first time they had received such an invitation. So the brunette decided that she absolutely had to find out. The girl snapped her fingers. The Count exhaled heavily. The majestic hall was lit up with new faces. The Acacia family had arrived. The brunette felt relieved, glad that no one was paying attention to them. In the noisy splendor of the ball among the many guests, their presence went unnoticed. The girl turned to the Count, wondering if he was worried. The man was shaking. He explained that he had already spoken about this. He said that if he suddenly fainted, then the lady should not pay attention to him and have a good time. The brunette was taken aback by such words. The girl tried to calm the Count. The man was breathing heavily. He even closed his eyes from fear. The loud ringing of a huge bell suddenly rang out in the noisy hall. Everyone's attention was riveted on the new faces. The Emperor and Empress, rulers of the great Ranta Empire, have arrived. Also arriving are the Crown Prince and Princess, the hope of the Empire, and also the second prince, who made a great achievement by subduing the Western rebels and showing the strength of the Empire. The girls admired. Some saw the second prince for the first time. One of the ladies was surprised why he was so handsome. She noticed his eyes. Our heroine froze in place. Such news could drive one crazy. It turned out that it was the second prince. She remembered her recent unexpected encounter with a stranger at the cemetery. Could it really be that man? The Emperor walked out onto the balcony with a glass in his hand. The man loudly invited everyone to celebrate the victory today and enjoy it. People in the hall shouted different slogans. They praised the Emperor. They praised the Empire. Many expressed loyalty to the Emperor and his family. The second prince looked around slowly. There were a lot of people around. A young man was looking out for someone in the crowd. Rhodes walked slowly down the marble steps, the prince in his snow-white robe looking great against the golden splendor. Our heroine got a little nervous. The girl covered her face with a golden fan. She was afraid that the young man saw her. The brunette tried to hide behind her husband's back. She wanted to remain unnoticed. Confusion grew inside her. Was the young man really coming towards her? Adrian closed her eyes. The golden fan trembled nervously in her hands. The girl really didn't want the prince to come near them. There were whispers all around. People were surprised that the second prince had asked a girl to dance. Many were puzzled as to who that girl was. The second prince of the Empire looked at his partner closely. Rhodes extended his hand to the young lady in the dark dress. The musicians raised their bows and touched the strings of their cellos. Gentle music swept through the hall. The prince and the stranger began to dance slowly. Count Acacia was breathing heavily. His wife was watching the dancing couple. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. She was glad. It seemed to her that the prince did not recognize her. Looking at the dancers, the girl was perplexed. It was unbelievable, but it turned out that the man from the cemetery was the second prince. Suddenly, the count coughed. The man turned pale. Adrian asked her husband what had happened. They had to go out after the first dance. The count turned pale and staggered. In a hoarse, barely audible voice, he tried to utter an apology. Suddenly, the man fell to the floor as if he had been mown down. The brunette was afraid for the count. The young man standing next to him started calling for help. Count Acacia also asked for help. The man was turning pale before our eyes. He hunched over and closed his eyes. Sitting on the floor of the ballroom, he could barely breathe. The young men offered to take him to the doctor. People watched with pity as one of the young men put the count on his back. The second decided to go with them. Our heroine watched what was happening in confusion. Suddenly, a male figure appeared behind her. The girl jerked in fear, feeling the stranger's proximity. She tried to run away, but the prince's hand grabbed her tightly from behind by both hands. The blonde pressed our heroine's back to his broad chest. The man was glad that he had found. In the ballroom, couples continued to dance, the music filling the space with light notes and smooth movements. The young people stood a little apart from the guests present. The brunette was indignant. She demanded to let her go. The girl realized that after this composition, everyone would pay attention to them. The brunette understood that she couldn't attract attention right now. After all, she hadn't met Noabian yet. Suddenly, a warrior with bright red hair approached them. He recognized the brunette and addressed her, calling her Lady Marge. The girl remembered that it was the knight she had seen last time. She remembered his name. It was Neil. The brunette was nervous. The unbearable Bondin stood behind her and held her back, not allowing her to move away. Our heroine realized that the second prince had sent Neil. Adrian tried to pull her hands out of the grip. The girl understood that she needed to free herself, but all attempts were in vain. The young man who was holding her leaned closer and said that he thought the girl was uncomfortable because she didn't have a partner. The music continued to play. The second prince of the Ranta Empire offered to help the brunette. The girl did not delay with the answer. Green eyes flashed angrily. The brunette sharply refused, clearly saying, "No." The blonde asked again if she needed help. Adrian shook her head. The young lady thought that it was he who was causing her discomfort now. The brunette really wanted the second prince to disappear. She needed to find Noabian first. Suddenly the musicians stopped playing. The girl panicked. They could have been seen. Adrian tried to break free again. She ordered to let her go. The blonde calmly asked again if she needed help. The girl turned around sharply and angrily shouted that yes, she needed help. She just asked to let her go. The blonde immediately removed his hand. The young man even showed his open palm to the girl. The brunette didn't look at His Highness. She breathed a sigh of relief. She was happy. He finally let her go. Unexpectedly, there was talk around that the second prince was here, and he chose a partner for the next dance. Our heroine's green eyes widened in surprise. The girl stared at the prince in bewilderment. The blonde and Adrian stood in the middle of the noisy hall and looked at each other. The gazes of those present were also directed at them. His Highness, looking at the girl, asked permission to dedicate her first dance to him. The young man gallantly extended his hand, waiting for the brunette's decision. Adrian was hesitant. The young woman didn't know if she should agree to this. People started whispering about who the prince was going to dance with. The guests were puzzled as to why the girl did not agree. Our heroine decided that she needed to finish quickly to attract less attention. The girl timidly placed her palm in the prince's outstretched hand. Bright light illuminated the rich decoration of the room. Music enveloped the hall. The shadows of the guests remained aside, giving way to this moment. The orchestra played masterfully. Music filled everything around, but the girl could not enjoy the dance. She thought about Rhodes, the second prince. The two young people continued to move in the dance. The brunette wondered how the prince knew her. She wondered why the young man was in the cemetery. Our heroine did not look up at her partner. Everything that was happening was very stressful for her. In the center of the room, the couple continued their dance. The other guests froze, watching the dancers. The girl thought, Noabian should be somewhere here. The prince's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. The brunette looked at His Highness. He noticed that his partner probably wasn't interested. The young man confessed that a girl who looked like her danced her first dance with him here. The prince thanked the brunette for these memories. He turned to Lady Acacia. Our heroine perked up. The brunette realized that the prince knew that she was not Marge. Moreover, the girl suddenly realized that His Highness had once danced with her. Memories brought our heroine back some time ago. The girl remembered that she was here at the ball only once. She was 20 years old, and this was her debut. The young beauty attended the annual New Year's masquerade ball. Our heroine tried to remember if she hadn't danced with her brother in Noebian back then. The prince remembered the girl who looked like her, and who danced her first dance with him here. He thanked Lady Acacia for the memories. Standing on the balcony, a young man in black clothes watched the dancers. He did not take his eyes off the couple of His Highness and Lady Acacia. Our heroine felt someone's gaze on her. Her eyes reflected Noebian's silhouette. She saw the one she really wanted to meet. The brunette pulled away from her dance partner. The girl was sure that she was supposed to meet the Archduke. His Highness tried to attract her attention, but the girl froze in place. She looked at Noebian with wide eyes. The young lady realized that she could not miss this opportunity. Having abandoned His Highness in the middle of the hall, the brunette hurried to look for the Archduke. She had to meet him and check everything. Having reached the top floor, the girl stopped. She no longer cared what would happen next. Stopping at the column, the brunette caught her breath. Looking around, the girl thought she had come to the right place. The spacious corridor was empty. Adrienne looked around. She quietly called Noebian's name. The brunette gasped loudly in surprise. The man's hand tightly squeezed her wrist. The Archduke's evil whisper accused her of continuing to tease him. He called the brunette Vlie. Our heroine thought that she was definitely not Vlie. She wondered if the Archduke would be able to recognize her. Suddenly, she smelled alcohol. It wasn't like him. The interlocutor reproached the girl for not intending to answer him. The Archduke was impatient. He asked if the girl was not going to keep her promise. He was holding the girl's wrist tightly. All the questions were mixed up in her head. Adrienne wondered who she was to him, that he behaved like that. Was Vlie really his lover? Our heroine was perplexed. Was this really what Count Acacia was talking about? But she was most interested in something else. The young woman was very eager to know what promise she was being asked to fulfill. The interlocutor standing opposite him tensed up. The Archduke exhaled angrily, surprised that the girl remained silent. Noebian lowered his head. The brunette reminded him of the promise they had made a year ago. The man let go of her hand. He asked if he should tell her about the loss of his wife. The brunette rubbed her wrist, painfully squeezed by Noebian. Looking closely at her interlocutor, she realized that he was truly sad. The girl suspected that he was having a hard time. She turned to No, asked him to tell her what she wanted to know. The brunette thought tensely that if not now, she might never find out what interested her. The Archduke stood with his back to our heroine. He muttered that if he lost his wife, the girl was to become his mistress. The Archduke admitted that he had thought of dying after Adrienne. Well, then he thought that she would not want that. And then the young man admitted that he remembered the brunette when he looked at her at his wife's funeral. Suddenly, the man grabbed his head with his hands. With bitterness in his voice, the Archduke admitted that he was remembering Adrienne. The young man said that it must have been hard and painful for him to be around Vlie. He suffered even when his wife was alive. With bitterness in his voice, he admitted how hard it was for him to watch when his loved one was terminally ill. Suddenly, he turned to the brunette who was silently looking at him. He asked if she knew what it was like. The young woman thought that she had never seen the suffering of her loved one until his death. But she remembered Noebian himself very well, crying over her body. It was more painful than anything she had ever seen. Our heroine was perplexed. If he loved her, why did he want to have a mistress? The brunette thought about it. She had some suspicions. The girl doubted. Could this really be the Noebian she knew? The girl looked her interlocutor resolutely in the eyes and asked if the Archduke wanted to spend the night with her. Adrienne remembered her husband's embrace. Thinking about it, she realized that he was the only one she could lean on in this gloomy castle. That wonderful caring man was her pride and love, Noebian Trobica. Having asked her direct question, the girl mentally prayed for No to say no, silently begged him to say that he didn't want Vlie. The Archduke laughed sadly. He asked if his interlocutor really wanted to humiliate him. Adrienne wanted Noebian to say that it was all a lie, but she heard the Archduke's confession. He said that he wanted her. The man spoke passionately about how he wanted her more than Adrienne, whom he had failed to possess, and whom he would never have again. The man kissed his interlocutor's lips. Bitter tears rolled from the girl's eyes. She thought that she always thought that kisses were not enough. The girl tried to push the Archduke away. She knew that this was not the embrace she wanted. It was very painful. Her heart was bleeding. Noebian continued to kiss her. The girl cried. She thought that it was so disgusting. Finding the strength in herself, the girl pushed the brunette away from her. The Archduke stared at his interlocutor in bewilderment. Clenching her hands into fists, our heroine demanded that he leave. Suddenly, the girl saw the prince's silhouette in the doorway. The blonde looked at her silently. His Highness's red eyes blazed with fire. Adrian, alone, sat on the steps of the gazebo in the castle park at night. The girl herself did not know how she escaped. Resting her face on her palms, the brunette wondered why the second Prince of Rhodes was there. The moment when Noebian kissed her came back to her mind. Bitter tears flowed from the young woman's eyes. The brunette found the strength to push the Archduke away. The young people looked at each other intently. Noebian had not expected this. Suddenly, Adrian saw the silhouette of the second prince nearby. She looked at his red eyes with surprise. It seemed to her that he was piercing her with his gaze. The girl suspected that, of course, he saw everything. Our heroine did not want to cross paths with him, so she simply ran away. Sitting on the cold marble steps of the gazebo, the girl wiped away bitter tears with her palm. She realized that she needed to go back, but she didn't have the strength. Covering her face with her hands, the brunette shook with bitter sobs. Adrian was perplexed. Why couldn't she stop crying? Suddenly, her gaze noticed something strange. One of her feet was bare. The girl realized that she had lost a shoe. She remembered that she had asked Marge. Rustlings in the depths of the park made the girl tense up. She peered into the darkness through the thick trees. The second prince came out to her in the clearing. The blonde looked at the girl attentively. Adrian rose from the marble steps. She made a bow. The blonde man watched her without taking his eyes off her. Finally, the young man said that he thought she needed help. The girl shook her head, said she didn't need it. His Highness, without turning his head, called out to kneel. The knight immediately approached the prince, holding out some object to him. The girl watched what was happening, as if spellbound. She realized with surprise that the blonde was holding a shoe in his hand. The brunette remembered that recent incident at the cemetery, when a stranger in a bloody waistcoat called her by name and asked her to wait. She had run away from the cemetery then. She didn't want to meet anyone. And now he had the shoe she had lost in the cemetery in his hands. His Highness said affirmatively that she needed help. He asked Lady Acacia if he was mistaken. Standing with one bare foot on the green grass of the night park, the girl thought that the prince had such a face as if he knew everything. Adrian reached out her hands to the shoe. She thanked His Highness and immediately put the shoe on her bare foot, jumping awkwardly on the spot. The brunette wanted to say something, but the prince interrupted her. The young man noticed that now she knew. His Highness thought that they should get acquainted. The girl panicked. She thought that he knew everything, and saw everything. She was at a loss as to who to introduce herself as. Who was she? Suddenly she realized that she was introducing herself as Noebian Trobek's lover. The brunette, looking into the prince's eyes, confidently declared that she was Noebian Trobek's lover. The girl nervously squeezed the fabric of her dress and declared that now she did not want to be just a mistress. The girl pulled herself together. She smiled sweetly. She asked coquettishly if she really looked like she needed help. The blonde came close to the girl. He answered positively. The brunette was wearing shoes of different colors. His Highness continued to insist. He decided to ask again. Does she need help? Loud screams were heard in the snow-white mansion of Acacia. The Countess was asked about her clothes. They tried to shout to the lady. The maids stood in front of the closed bedroom doors. They didn't know what to do. Moonlight streamed into the young woman's bedroom. Adrienne, in a gorgeous ball gown, lay on her huge bed. The girl recalled that her tears just kept flowing. Adrienne cried the whole way. The maids outside the door tried to shout to the mistress. They were interested in what had happened. They asked if maybe something was hurting her. Adrienne turned over silently. She didn't want to hear anyone or say anything right now. She recalled Noebian's words about how it was very difficult for him to watch his loved one become terminally ill. With pain in his voice, clutching his head, the young man asked if she knew what it was like. In the silence of her bedroom, the girl thought about what she didn't know. She wondered if maybe she should have said she didn't know. Covering her face with her hands, the girl sobbed uncontrollably. If only he would tell her how he felt. It would have been better if Noebian had honestly said that it was hard for him. And if he had loved her, he would not have hugged this girl. Adrienne was puzzled. Did she really have to date him like Vli now? Should she live like a shadow and hide? As Vli, The brunette clearly remembered how the prince asked her again if she needed help. Rhodes, the second prince. He spoke as if he knew everything, as if he knew the real her. The brunette asked how the prince could help her. The blonde asked what she wanted. His Highness honestly admitted that he did not want to get involved in lovers' quarrels. The brunette covered her face with her hand in despair. Rhodes said that the next time he asked the girl if she needed help, it would be better to be specific. His Highness insisted that the girl should speak herself. Adrienne wondered what he had hoped for. The girl wanted to understand who he was. If he helped her, what would she owe him? The excited voice of the young maid asked if the mistress had eaten much yesterday. Iona combed her mistress's hair and reported that it turned out that the lady did not know how to drink at all. She said that they were worried. The brunette thought that perhaps Jonah had noticed her clothes and tears during the night. The young lady felt awkward, but she was grateful. Looking through the morning newspapers, the girl tried to understand how she was supposed to live now. She decided that she had to leave Noebian. Unexpectedly, she came across an article in the newspaper about monetary compensation. The text promised to receive it for the client. Our heroine was delighted. Adrienne decided that she needed to divorce Count Acacia, get compensation, and leave. The brunette decided to find information in books. A book called For Divorced Noble Ladies caught her eye. Our heroine reached out her hand to the tome. The brunette smiled cheerfully, looking at the book. She thought that it was left there on purpose. Suddenly, a book with a pink cover fell from the shelf. Iona covered her eyes with her hands and said she saw nothing. Adrienne stared at the maid in surprise. The maid explained that it was a lady's diary. She knew nothing because she wrote everything in a foreign language. Iona called the lady so secretive. Adrienne was very happy with such an unexpected gift. In her hands was Vli Akatsia's diary. The brunette, in anticipation, opened the diary and was taken aback when she saw the language it was written in. She realized that she hated this language more than anything else in the world. The brunette asked her husband how he felt about starting preparations for a divorce in the near future. In the dining room, the Count and his wife sat on opposite sides of the table, like distant shores. The long table was richly and generously covered with all kinds of food. The man slowly wiped the corners of his mouth with a napkin and asked the butler to bring him something. The servant bowed and immediately brought what was required. A yellowed document lay on the table in front of the girl. The brunette thought that it seemed he had been waiting for a long time. The paper was already very worn out. Having quickly glanced over the text, the young lady was surprised to inform her husband that the document did not contain a clause on monetary compensation. The Count coughed nervously. He did not understand what kind of monetary compensation was being discussed. The brunette realized that if she had to divorce the Count, she would need money to start a new life. A cold sweat broke out on the Count. He asked in a strangled voice how much his wife would like. Our heroine smiled sweetly at her husband and suggested that they be honest with each other. She understood that the marriage had been concluded on the orders of the Archduke. Therefore, the dowry had to be considerable. She had to take care of her share. The Count showed 2 fingers and asked if that would be enough for his wife. The girl was silent, only looking attentively at the man. The Count's hand trembled as he held up 3 fingers. His wife smiled and asked him to think about the benefit he would receive. The lord was perplexed. The man wondered what benefit he could have. The brunette was very interested in what he was thinking about. The girl decided that perhaps he was expecting a reward from Noebian, or maybe a well-deserved rest. Suddenly, understanding flashed in the brunette's green eyes. It seemed to her that the Count was being too petty. Adrienne extended her hand forward to her husband. The girl considered the Count's behavior. He was behaving strangely, as if he expected a reward. Suddenly, the girl showed 5 fingers. The brunette clearly said that this is how many she wanted. The Count turned even paler at his wife's demands. A drop of cold sweat ran down the man's cheek. He was forced to agree. The brunette put her signature on the document. She asked if she could use the title Countess if she went to the Archduke. Having received the long-awaited signature on the document from his wife, the man cheered up. He answered affirmatively. Of course the girl could use this title. Exhaling sharply, the brunette closed her eyes. She realized that she had taken the first step towards Noebian. Adrienne reasoned that she had a new body. She needed to focus on her new life. Resentment, revenge. She needed to be firm. The girl remembered their last meeting. She decided that next time she would firmly tell Noebian, who thought that Vli belonged to him. Goodbye. The brunette was reading Vli Akatsia's diary. Our heroine hated this language since her time at the academy. It was the Elikon language. Adrian peered at the letters. She put her hand to her forehead. She muttered that this language was here again. The girl remembered nothing. Leafing through the pages of someone else's, but such an interesting diary. The brunette did not understand how she was supposed to read it. She still didn't know what exactly Vli had written in her diary. She hoped it would be about her relationship with Noebian. Adrian knew she couldn't take the translator. She knew she needed to learn the basics. She only needed the basics. It was just a diary. The maid Iona wheeled a serving table into the office. She suggested that the lady take a break. The brunette asked the maid if there had been any news from the Elikon teacher. Iona replied that he had not yet. The lady became sad. The maid tried to calm the lady down, saying that he would definitely show up. Having offered the lady some tea, Iona asked if the Archduke had sent her anything. The brunette looked at the maid in bewilderment. Then her gaze fell on the envelope, sealed with red sealing wax. This morning a dress arrived at the Acacia Mansion with an invitation. Our heroine didn't want to look at it and avoided it all morning. Taking the message, the girl realized that it was from Archduke Trobic. The brunette was holding an invitation from Noebian. Noticing that the lady had withdrawn into herself, Iona muttered that then she would leave the lady. Adrian stared thoughtfully into space. She couldn't ignore it any longer. Finally unfolding the letter, our heroine saw familiar handwriting. She was invited to a banquet on the occasion of the birthday of Archduchess Adrian Trebicki. The brunette stared at the invitation in bewilderment. She was surprised that she was invited to a birthday party. At the funeral, they all wanted to gather and honor her memory and services. Then there was a polite request to come and honor Duchess Trobica. Noebian insisted that it was all for his dead wife. After all, she would always live in their hearts. Adrian was shocked by this message. She wondered how anyone could celebrate a dead person's birthday. With each line, it all seemed more and more absurd. The event must take place at the Archduke's. The vassals could not miss it. And the Count disappeared as soon as he saw the invitation. Then Vlia must be there. Running her eyes over the lines again, the girl thought that this was something that they usually didn't want to draw attention to. Did Noebian really like it? The brunette felt very strange. She began to think that he liked to generate rumors and discussions among people. Our heroine thought that her caring husband, Archduke Trobica, had gone mad after his wife's death. He was throwing a party in honor of the dead man. The girl wondered if he was doing this for Adrian. The brunette suspected that he had called Vli for a reason. Green eyes flashed. The girl made a decision and thought that everything else was unimportant. She decided to accept Noebian's invitation. On the evening in memory of Archduchess Trebica, all the guests were again dressed in mourning clothes. Iona looked at her mistress with doubt. She asked the lady if she could at least take a shawl. She insisted that it was, after all, an evening in memory of Archduchess Adrian Swan Trobica. The brunette looked charming and bold. The open scarlet dress took away the porcelain color of her skin. Emerald eyes sparkled brightly on her beautiful face. The girl who entered the hall was very different from everyone else present. People began to whisper, discussing her outfit. The brunette blushed in embarrassment. The girl thought that it was a memorial evening. A wake. The girl was perplexed. After all, the invitation clearly spoke of a birthday. Our heroine found herself under the watchful eyes of everyone present. Adrian, her head held high, decided she needed to get out of sight. She slowly walked forward along the carpet. Suddenly, Archduke Trobica appeared on her path. The man was descending the stairs. He grinned wickedly. He was glad to meet her. Looking closely at the guest, the brunette noticed that the wife of his faithful vassal, Countess Acacia, had arrived. But no one greeted her. Our heroine was furious. She mentally asked herself what kind of creature this Noebian was. I was puzzled as to why he invited Vli and even lied, saying that it was a banquet in honor of a birthday. The man even sent her this gorgeous dress to wear to the banquet. Nervously, the brunette replied that she hadn't known that the place would have such a serious atmosphere. She had been told for sure that it would be a birthday party. The brunette expressed understanding that the girl was not yet accustomed to the capital's social life. He suggested that if she didn't object, he would give her something to put on from his wife's wardrobe. The brunette chuckled to herself. The girl realized that it was a trick so that the Archduke could be alone with Vli. Adrian politely thanked the owner of the house. The brunette pointed with his hand in the direction and asked to follow in that direction. Noebian let his hand fall below the countess's waist. He called the butler. He ordered the servant to first take care of Count Acacia's wife. The butler replied that he understood his master. Suddenly, goosebumps of fear ran through the brunette's body. The girl recognized this man. He did not protect Adrienne and simply watched from the side. It was Gaspard, the butler of the Trobic mansion. The man offered the lady to lean on his elbow. He asked the lady to go with him. The butler led the lady into a spacious apartment. He asked Countess Acacia to wait here for a while. The girl settled down on a soft sofa. She breathed a sigh of relief when the servant left the room. The girl rose abruptly from her seat and realized that she had no time to rest now. The brunette remembered that there were definitely jewelry there that she had brought from her parents' house. Moving quickly around the apartment, the girl approached the chest of drawers. She decided to do everything quickly before someone came. She grabbed the handle and pulled the shelf towards herself. Since she had come this far, she had to take everything that could help her. A confused look stared at the empty jewelry box. The girl wondered where they all went. She remembered the necklace she had inherited. There were other pieces of jewelry too. There was nothing now. Adrienne imagined the maids wearing her jewelry. She assumed that it was definitely the maid's work. The brunette was shaking with anger. She clenched her hands into fists. She decided that she would at least take the remaining jewelry. Our heroine realized that they were originally hers, but she trembled as if she were stealing. Having quickly hidden the remaining jewelry in the folds of her dress, the girl went to the place. She managed to sit down on the soft sofa in time, because the next moment the door opened and two young men entered the room. Noebian asked the butler to come out and greet the guests. Gaspar was surprised at first by the master's words. Quickly realizing what he needed to do, he hastened to take his leave and carry out the Archduke's order. The brunette and Adrienne found themselves alone in a spacious room. The Archduke held a black shawl in his hands. The young man pointed out the object to the girl and came over to help her put it on her shoulders. Finding himself behind the brunette, the young man hugged her. He whispered Vlia's name like a madman. The brunette had the feeling that this woman was definitely his lover. The green-eyed guest stuttered slightly and asked why he did it. She realized that this man had never hugged her so tightly. Adrienne was shaking with tension. She asked why the man said it was her birthday and sent her such a dress. The girl didn't understand what to do. She felt like she was going to cry. The brunette replied that today was, indeed, his wife's birthday. Adrienne told herself to pull herself together. If she cried here, it might seem strange. The girl turned to her interlocutor. She reminded him that it was written in the hall that it was a memorial banquet. A man has admitted that if he had thrown a birthday party for his dead wife, everyone would have thought he was crazy. He hugged the girl tightly by the shoulders, pulling the shawl. He said that this was why they would have a party, just the two of them. The brunette asked him to stop. The shawl slowly slid off her shoulders and fell as a black blot on the floor at the girl's feet. The brunette tried to stop the man. She was worried that if things went on like this, he would be able to find the jewelry she had taken. Trying to keep her interlocutor at a distance, the girl decided that she had to act like Vli. She demanded to see the Archduchess's bedroom. Adrienne smiled coquettishly and said that the Archduchess's bedroom would soon be hers, so she would like to do it there. Noebian went with the guest to the ex-wife's chambers. The brunette asked if she could open the chest of drawers. The man did not object. Wrapping herself in a black shawl, the girl feverishly thought of what she would say if she were the real Vli. She knew it had to be something light, like it was nothing special. Without turning to the Archduke, the girl said that she had heard that all noble ladies kept their favorite jewels in their bedroom. The girl tried to act like a lady who loved luxurious things. She noticed that it seemed like the Archduchess was not one of those types of people. The brunette looked around and said that she wanted to look around a bit, but there was nothing there. Noebian immediately jumped up from his seat and asked in surprise what she meant. He approached the girl, trying to understand why she said there was nothing there. Looking into the empty box, the man was taken aback. Noebian exclaimed in shock. He could not believe it. This could not be. The indignant cry of the gentleman who called Gaspar echoed throughout the mansion. The maids walked quickly along the corridors of the mansion. The girls quietly discussed among themselves how this could have happened. They said that that woman had come. They gossiped about the Archduke's mistress, whom he was hiding. They were surprised that one of them had not heard about her from the butler. The girls entered the room. Everyone stared at the brunette in bewilderment. One maid screamed in surprise, calling the guest mistress. Gaspard quickly put his finger to his mouth. He ordered the maid to watch her tongue. The maid was covered in sticky sweat. She wondered how this woman could be so similar to the other one. The rude woman suddenly remembered how disdainfully and rudely she had treated her sick mistress. Adrienne felt uneasy. She watched Gaspard and the maids. The butler said that he came as soon as his master called him. Noebian was perplexed. The brunette grabbed his head. He could not imagine who dared to touch his wife's jewelry. The maids looked down at the floor. Their master told them that, as it turned out, there was a rat in the Archduchess's bedroom. Gaspar reported that they had finished searching the maids' quarters, but they had found nothing. Suddenly, a brunette intervened in the conversation. The girl suggested that there were places they hadn't looked at yet. For example, clothes.